Pioneer's DJ-inspired performance sampler is the start of something new. At last year's Music Mess, I made a beeline for the Pioneer booth to check out a prototype of their new performance sampler. Like many, I was intrigued by the idea of a hardware sampler with 4x4 pads, a touchscreen and USB storage connectivity. Could this fill the gap left by standalone MPCs? 1 year on and the SP-16 is out in the wild, along with the Toraiz sibling, the AS1 monosynth, but the landscape has changed a bit with the launch of the MPC-X and MPC Live. In any case, the SP-16 has a fairly focused drum sampler feature set and doesn't overlap that much into production workstation territory. Instead, Pioneer are carving a new niche with instruments that enable DJs and EDM performers to be more actively engaged in the sets. The SP-16 makes a real impression when you turn it on. The colorful pads, sequencer buttons and screen are bright. The general solidity of the hardware and the clearly laid out panel all point to an instrument born for the stage. There are pads to hit, dedicated filter knobs to twiddle, a touch strip with self-explanatory modes, and a row of buttons for sequencing and pattern triggering. With one of the demo projects loaded, you can figure out most of what the box can do in a half hour's experimentation and be happily banging out a crowd-pleasing improvised set. Anything deeper can be accessed via the 7-inch touchscreen and its attendant rotary encoders. Having satisfied my initial curiosity using just headphones, I set about exploring the box's other connectivity options. Split outputs are available via 4 sets of stereo 1/4-inch jacks, the master stereo out, plus 3 more OPEs. A line-level stereo input with gain control provides for sampling directly into the SP-16. Regular MIDI ports and USB both provide routes to interact and sync with other devices. The RJ45 link port is used to beat sync with other DJ devices, using Pioneer's proprietary Pro DJ Link protocol over standard network cables and switches. The AS1 doesn't have this, so you'd use regular MIDI clock to pair the Toraizes. The USB port can also be used to hook up to a computer for MIDI clock and performance communication with your music software, and for file transfer with the internal storage. There's also a USB port on the front for connecting a thumb drive. On the SP-16's rear panel, we find an input for the external 12V SU, an RJ45 port for syncing to other Pioneer units, MIDI I/O ports, a USB port, and all on 1/4-inch jack sockets, stereo inputs, 8 individual outputs and a headphone socket. Despite the fun I was having with the demo projects, which, by the way, are excellent and give you a great idea of what you can do with the SP-16, pride dictated that I start from scratch. File management is via the touchscreen, where you can load and save projects to the internal flash memory or a connected USB stick. I imagined I'd start work using a familiar MPC, machine or push approach by browsing some library content and loading a likely kit program. But no. The SP-16 has no concept of a kit as separate from a project or scene. You can import scenes, but none are provided, so the default workflow is to load up each pad separately with a sample. And these 16 pads/voices are basically what you have to work with at any one time, reminding you that you're dealing with a single instrument here, rather than a multi-track production system. The SP-16 does blur this line slightly by calling the pads tracks, and mimicking workstation-like behavior via the slice and scale modes, but each track is only ever a single sample played monophonically. Importantly, though, each of a project's scenes, of which you can have 16, can have a completely different sample set and configuration. After a pad is loaded with a sample, you can tap it on the touchscreen grid to edit its parameters. A summary screen shows an overview of the most important settings like playback mode and position, amp envelope and effects, and gives you control over a few key parameters from the knobs. Tapping any of these sections takes you to a dedicated screen with more detailed controls, occasionally allowing for use of the touchscreen, for example for setting start and end points for sample playback. In general though, the screen is underused, with many selection/targeting operations relying on the main entry dial, and parameters controlled from the under-screen rotaries. This is probably because the screen doesn't have the kind of multi-touch capacitive response you'd expect from, say, an iPod. The multicolor pads are not just pleasing to look at. They play with the solidity and responsiveness you'd expect from a drum machine this expensive. To capture a pattern, you can simply set a tempo, enable the click, and hit record. Following convention, you can swap between rehearsing and overdubbing during playback by toggling the record status. Record quantize defaults to 1/16 THS, but can be changed or switched off entirely to faithfully capture your feel or, in my case, bad timing. MPC style repeat functionality is available as a touch strip mode, letting you slide through different repeat speeds. Classic gate sequencing operation is provided by the 16 buttons along the bottom, which can be paged through 4 bars, for a total of 64 steps per pattern. Not only do the buttons feel great, they light up to match the color of the selected pad/track, making it easy to see what you're working on. The sequencer buttons also have modes for recalling and launching patterns and scenes. If the SP-16 is playing, it will quantize triggers to the end of the current pattern. A dedicated scene manager screen lets you copy/paste and color code your scene and pattern slots, and also serves as an alternative place to trigger them. Sequences can be viewed in each pad's main screen view, where you can fine-tune and edit them. Here you can see exactly where your hits are placed relative to the grid, unlike on the buttons, which can obviously only show an approximation. The range of editing operations includes quantizing and offsetting of notes, shifting a whole sequence, and re-triggering notes to produce double or triple hits, etc. Operations can be applied to the whole sequence, or you can choose a range. You can also hold a sequence step button and make changes that will apply just to that step. This is also how you edit velocity, and is the key to automation on the SP-16, which is always step-based. Changing any parameter while holding a step button will dial that value in to be automated in real time, relative to the base setting.